Now, that's neither good nor bad. It's a pure statement of historical fact.
Yeah. The irony, though, let's not miss the irony here. The irony is that you are the darling of the conservative, of almost, is there anybody left who doesn't think we have too much government? And you are as eloquent a spokesman against that abuse as there is walking around today. You are also on record as supporting the candidacy of Ronald Reagan.
Yes, indeed.
Do I have to tell you what happens to Ronald Reagan's candidacy if he so much as breathes agreement to the statements you've just made about drugs?
Well, fortunately, one of the great virtues of being a college professor is that you can say exactly what you believe and what you mean. I'm not running for office. I've never run for office. I have no desire to run for office. And so I regard it as a great luxury that I can be irresponsible.
We'll be back to this one.
I just don't believe that you can take away laws. I have children. If I don't tell them what to do and how to raise them, they won't know what we expect of them. I feel
There's nothing against you telling your kids what to do.
No, but I meant you compare the government to that, telling us what to do and deregulation and everything. I think we have to have something to go by.
Well, but you see, what you're expressing is precisely the paternalistic view of government that I object to. I don't believe government is a mother of children. I don't believe government is a father of children. I believe government is a way in which you and I and our fellow citizens achieve certain things jointly that we can't achieve separately. And I believe it is your responsibility as a mother to bring up your children in accordance with the values you believe. And I believe it's a cop-out for you to say, I want the government to do that for me.
No, but there's some... You were talking about suicides and how if you had a friend who was going to commit suicide, people who commit suicide are very lonely people. They usually don't have people to turn to.
Right.
So if you can help them with counseling, which the government would fund, that would save a life, which is very dear.
There are different ways to achieve that. Most counseling groups for suicides, in fact, are not financed by government money. First of all, the government doesn't have any money. Only people have money. The government only gets money by putting its hand in your pocket and taking it out. And if you believe in the desirability of a counseling agency to counsel suicides, more power to you. Get together with friends, organize it, finance it on your own. And if the government didn't take as much money out of your pockets as it does, you'd be better able to do it. It's
and also there would be fewer lonely people and less suicide.
That's right.
How am I doing, all right?
Absolutely.
I'm a slow learner, but I'm coming along.
You're getting there, Phil.
Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am. You want to stand, please? We're in Chicago with Professor Milton Friedman. Yes.
Since you do like Ronald Reagan, and let's say he wins the election and he chooses you as his chief economic advisor, what would you do to restore our economy back on the right track? And would you put us on a gold standard, or could you put us on a gold standard?
Well, you've asked 3 questions, and I'll try to answer all 3 of them. Number 1, I have been offered the chairmanship of the Council of Economic Advisors in the past, and I have refused it, and I guarantee you I would refuse it again.
Because you feel that it's what? That you have something essential?
I believe that I personally can be more useful outside the government than I can. Inside, it's a very important job. There are many able people who can do the job. I don't believe that's the way I can use my abilities and my interests most effectively. I want to remain irresponsible. You see what I mean by that. If you're in that kind of a position, it's right and proper that you're part of a team, and if the team decides on something you don't agree with, you either go along with it or you quit. Well, I would rather stay on the outside where I can express my own views, and I believe I am more effective in that way than I personally would be inside the government. So I have no doubts about that. But number 2, let me answer your second 2 questions. What measures should the government take to try to restore economic health to the United States? And I have very little doubt about what the major measures there. But let me say first, you're not going to do it overnight. We've gotten into our present pickle because of 3 decades of mismanagement of the economy. And we're not going to get out of it in 6 months. But what you have to do is, number 1, you have to move to cut down government spending, to hold down the rate of growth of government spending in dollars and to cut it in terms of purchasing power. Number 2, you have to have a restrained monetary policy. not a shock treatment, not a real cut in the quantity of money, but to hold down and have a gradual reduction in the rate of monetary growth. Number 3, you have to eliminate as many of the regulations that now bedevil the economy as you possibly can. The most important area there is the energy area. We have created the energy mess because of governmental intervention. The most effective measure we could take for both foreign policy and domestic policy would be to get rid of the Department of Energy, to get rid of this mislabeled windfall profits tax, to let the private enterprise economy go to work to produce the energy that we need. Now, on your last question, I do not believe it is either feasible or desirable to establish a gold standard under current circumstances. The gold standard served well in the 19th century. If you could restore the conditions of the 19th century, namely a situation in which federal government spending was 3% of national income, right, I'd be in favor of a gold standard.
And some of your detractors would want you to know that the writings of your hero, Adam Smith, took place as well in the 19th century.
No, it didn't in the 18th century.
All right, then my point is even more valid. If the gold standard is no longer applicable, given the modern nature of economics, how can we expect Adam Smith's writings to be?
Well, the principles...
Which are even older, as you call them.
Well, you know, the Bible is 2,000 years old, and I don't think you would say that the principles of the Bible are not applicable, but the way you apply them are different, the circumstances are different. Right. The principles of Adam Smith are just as applicable today, but they have to be applied differently because the circumstances are different. And those principles made sense of the gold standard in the 19th century and don't in the 20th.
We'll talk later about the fairness of referring to the Bible when arguing with the principles. We'll be back in just a You want to get rid of the FCC too, huh?
No, sure, of course.
Get rid of the Federal Communications Commission.
Course.
If you can buy, you would regulate, I mean, we got to have some control over the airwaves.
No. No, what I would do would be to have the Federal Communications Commission have a big auction at which they would auction off all the present television and radio licenses.
And then only fat cats would own radio and television stations,
nonsense.
Which many detractors say is the situation now.
Well, first place, there are many of them, and many people could come in and compete with them. Do only fat cats... we were talking about airlines. Only fat cats own airlines? No, anybody here can buy a share of stock in United Airlines or in TWA in the same way with...
So they'd be
radio
publicly
and TV
held,
stations.
and stockholders could dissent if they didn't like the commercials, if the commercials were too loud?
Well, they could sell, if they thought that the company, the station wasn't doing a good job, they could sell their stock. Much more effective than voting in Washington, because each individual separately can decide what to do. But more important, if you once made it into private property, it would be not subject to the fairness doctrine. You would have the same kind of free press on radio and television, right, that you now have in the newspapers.
Are you going to trust me to put all of the candidates on my program? Or am I just going to put my favorite
candidate? Put your favorite on, and some other station will put its favorite on. You do not get fairness by every individual program being fair. You do not get fairness by every individual station get fairness. In any event, I'm not in favor of fairness. I'm in favor of freedom. And freedom is not fairness. Fairness means somebody has to decide what's fair. And that means the FCC people have to decide what's fair. And I don't want the FCC people to decide for me what I should listen to or hear. And you wouldn't be able, if the public at large didn't agree with your choices, you'd be out of business.
Yeah, I would.
So you know, it's a funny thing. People think that it's the appearance of power versus the reality of power. It looks like as if you have a lot of power over what you put on your show, but you don't.
Really?
Because if you didn't appeal to the public, if these people didn't like you, do a marvelous job. I'm not questioning that. But you do a marvelous job because you have found an audience for your product.
So in other words, my power comes from the people, is your point.
Absolutely.
And if I just put on all of my favorites, then the public will clearly see that Donahue was sold out and their eye.
Look, I've been reading your book. It's a good book, and I recommend it to you just as he recommended mine. But in that book, you point out the difficulties you had getting into New York.
Yes.
Suppose you had to have government permission to go into New York. Do you think you would have had it any easier? Do you think you could